All right. Well, welcome to the Online Network of Independent Learning Professionals. We are having a very special presentation today by Christy Tucker. She's going to be talking about character consistency solved. She's been talking about this AI image generation characters for quite some time, so we're super excited to delve into her world and learn a bit more. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that I don't know if you have something you want to pull up. Oh, let me actually turn on the share.
Yes, can you give me permission to share?
Yes, that's step one. Look at that. And she's going to talk about practical workflows for creating consistent character images across scenarios, which has been quite a problem for me in many projects. So I am selfishly very excited about this. So I will turn it over to you, Christy, and you can take it away.
All right. So, while I'm getting my screens rearranged a little bit, I will be watching the chat during this. I think this is a group. This isn't such a large group that I shouldn't be able to follow it, but and I will try to respond during. You can ask questions at any point. But if I miss something, Patty,
Yep,
flag it for me later,
I will.
and keep
I'll
an
keep
eye on it.
track.
But so this is a webinar that I did for Training Mag Network a while back, and Danny Watkins was there when I presented it and had said, "Ooh, this was really good," and we did a poll, and it sounded like more people were interested. So I realized that if you follow me on LinkedIn, you may actually remember this particular one, but of these two images, which one is AI?
There's a
And
consensus
see.
going so far.
As I say, you all are doing better. And both. I will say, I think James, when I posted this on LinkedIn, so we'll say this is one that I did maybe 6 months ago. And I think people are better at recognizing AI images now than they were even 6 months ago. And I will also say, on LinkedIn, both was probably the most, like lots of people thought I was tricking them. But yes, B is the one that is AI. I think people also got thrown off by kind of the background in this image, which is a little weird. This one, the one on the left, is from Unsplash. Um, but even if you can figure out that this is AI, is this like, especially if it was something that's going to be up for a couple of seconds in a course, is that one on the right good enough to use in a course, right? And I think that this is, part of what we're going to do here is make sure that we are doing images that are genuinely good quality. I think that there is a lot of resistance to AI images right now, and part of that is because there is a lot of crap out there. Like there really is a lot of slop. There's a lot of stuff that is very obviously AI, and we can do better. So we're going to talk specifically about character consistency today. So this is a set of images that I actually generated probably a year and a half ago. And there's things I can actually do better now than when I generated this set. But even then, um, you can see I got this particular character, different color shirts, a setting in an office, speaking in front of a whiteboard, and at home in four different color shirts, different settings with her hair up or down. And her face is pretty consistent in these, right? And not that there's zero flaws in here, but this is good enough that you could use it in a scenario, especially because you will notice more changes when you see the images side by side than you will if you're using them in a scenario and they're consecutive images. I mean, yes, you should be watching for things, but note that um, you're probably pickier sometimes than your learners might be. So, those of you who have tried generating images, and I will say for the purposes of this, I'm kind of curious what people are using right now. And I would say anything that you've experimented with or tested out should count for this. even if you're not using it extensive. Don't feel like I'm asking which ones you're an expert in. Um, so Nana Banana, yep. Um, Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Flow, yeah. Yeah, and the change blindness, I think there is some reality to that. Um, Midjourney, Nano Banana, Envato, Ideogram. Yeah, I think Ideogram's face swapping is not my favorite choice. I agree that it's probably not. I think you're right, Carrie, that it's probably not keeping up. But all right. So we've got lots of choices and Allison, I find that interesting that you're looking at ChatGPT being better than Nana Banana. Before ChatGPT's last image update, I really was recommending people stay away from it if at all possible. The last update for ChatGPT that, removed the yellow filter and everything that was the consistent problem there has made a big difference. And I agree that I'm much happier with ChatGPT now than I was 6 months ago. And it's tricky because even I do a lot of image work and even I have trouble keeping up with all of the changes. So, all right. Basic workflow here. We're going to always start with a reference image. When you're trying to change things, generally speaking, you're going to change one element at a time, maybe two elements. This is going to require some iteration and some refining. So things will go wrong. And I do find that I am sometimes running into the limits in particular tools and I end up switching tools. So I wish there was an easy button where I could say, yep, you can use one tool and it'll do 100% of things. We get close in a couple of them, but I still think that combining tools may be more effective. So this is an example of a set of images I built for a scenario last year. This is a client project. Branching scenario, there's a main character who has conversations with several other characters through the course of this scenario. So, um, he has the red shirt in the original one, but he's talking with another student. Then he's in the library talking with, there's actually a group of students there. Then he's talking with a professor in her office on a different day, so I changed the color of his shirt. Um, I started in Midjourney for the original reference image. And then I was trying to get things in Nana Banana. Nana Banana is also Gemini. The official name is something Gemini Flash Pro something or another, but Nana Banana is what it's usually called. Um, but I had a place where Nana Banana absolutely got stuck, and I could not get these two characters in the upper right, the woman with the hijab, would not put her in a scene with him under any circumstances. And I gave up and switched actually to Runway, which is mostly a video tool, but because it is image to video, you can add multiple reference images and it will combine them into a scene for you. So, tools I use. Most of these were mentioned here. I might put ChatGPT back on my list as discussed. But Midjourney, a couple that didn't get mentioned, Flux, Flora, Runway, Magnific and Enhancer are two tools for improving images. So I'll talk about that. So I am ending up cobbling together multiple different tools in order to do this. So if you've looked at AI image generation, you know that there's sort of an AI face that is like there's a sort of normalized facial structure that ends up coming up over and over. And once you start seeing that pattern, you'll see it over and over. And that's probably because tools like Nana Banana and ChatGPT want to be consistent and accurate in adhering to prompts, but that means that they aim for the middle of the bell curve including in facial structures. They don't go as weird. And so it does end up kind of looking generic. And one of my goals is that I don't want it to look generic. I don't want it to look like the character cut up photos, and I don't want it to look like stock photos. I want something more interesting. And it's one of the reasons that I continue to pay for Midjourney, even though I don't think it does character consistency as well as some of the other tools. We'll see after version 8 of Midjourney comes out. It's currently in alpha testing, so and you can't do characters with it, consistent characters with it right now. We'll see after the next update. Um, but I do tend to start and generate my initial character references in Midjourney because I can get a lot wider variety in facial structures and it doesn't always look like the same person. It can do consistent characters. It's really great at doing consistent styles. I've done photorealistic and illustrated. It does not have any real way to do multiple characters in a scene though. This is one of the reasons that I end up using multiple tools. So I'll start in Midjourney and go elsewhere. You can skip this, but I do like my results there. And this is a character I did in Midjourney. So you can see like the texture in her shirt. You can see what her hair looks like. The pattern on her earrings, like all of that was good for Midjourney. Midjourney, if you tried Midjourney early on and saw it only in Discord and got intimidated by it, it does have a web interface now. So you prompt at the top, you get by default 4 results for every prompt. There are editing tools built in. There's ways to organize it. You can kind of tune your personal style and the things that you like on Midjourney, so you can get it to go more photorealistic or get it to go more cinematic or more illustrated depending on what you're doing. So, prompt structure. This is the basic framework that I use for prompting for images. And this structure works in almost all of the tools. So even though Midjourney and ChatGPT and Nana Banana work in different ways, this overall structure kind of generally works. Starting with the image style and putting it at the front. For image prompts, the order in which you prompt things does seem to matter, and putting the style at the beginning means you get that framing right. The subject, action, physical characteristics is things like race, gender. If we're describing the face, we're talking about skin, hair, the clothes, the setting, the additional details. You can definitely switch around the order of these, especially in the middle. Consider this a little bit fluid. You also don't necessarily need every part of this for every prompt, but at least in the initial reference images, this is basically what I use. And you can use, I have tried this structure in kind of all of those tools that we talked about, and this does generally work. So here's the example of this. This is an editorial photo of an Asian woman working on a laptop in a sunny home office, focused expression, and a blue coffee mug on the desk. So this breaks down to editorial photo is the style. If you look at image prompting tips online, you'll see a lot of hyper realistic or photorealistic or cinematic photo. Those are great for marketing images, and I don't find that they're as effective for training images. I find that editorial photo is my phrase that gets me the most consistent photorealistic, but not as staged as a stock photo. That seems to be a better prompting phrase. Subject is who's your person? Who's your character? What are they doing? What's the setting? Some characteristic, right? Like an expression and emotion. I had other details in the setting. With image prompting, generic prompts tend to get less accurate results. Just like when you're used to prompting in an LLM, where giving it more context gets you better results. Same thing with an image, except that very long image prompts may not get you quite as good results. You do tend to be better off going shorter. If multi-paragraph prompts for images tend to actually confuse the prompt model. So you do have to be a little tighter, but you do have to provide specific details. And you can see how much difference there is just in this. And if you just say a person doing a thing, you will get generally a white man. If you want diversity in your images, you have to specifically ask for it. If you want more about diversity in images, Tristan Sylvester, who I see is on the call, has a great webinar that she did for Training Mag Network, explaining about bias in AI images and the problem of that. And so I'm not going to go into this too much. You should go watch the recording of her webinar. Tristan, feel free to drop that link in the chat here and promote yourself. Because I think she did a really good job breaking it down and looking at the research of it. It is a problem. AI image, stock images already kind of have problems with diversity and representation. And the AI images are trained on those, and they often tend to amplify stereotypes. So you do have to prompt to counter those stereotypes. Positive language, describing what you want, not what you don't want. It is better, for example, to say a clean desk, not no clutter. Now, sometimes image tools will have a feature for negative prompts. So it is like Kate says, you prompt, I can say like a diverse team will often get me reasonably good results. And right, it is what you do want, and that's going to be better. I remember Carrie had one where she was working on ages ago. I'm sure it would probably be better now, where she was trying to do police officers doing a community policing and talking to people in the community and having a nice positive interaction. And she said no guns, and the tool, every time she asked for no guns, the tool kept putting more and more guns into the image. And even though in theory ChatGPT and Nana Banana should be smart enough to recognize when you say no or not, in practice, I get mixed results from that. I think it would be better now than it was at the time that Carrie was doing that specific example that I remember. So you have to say like peaceful and community and never say the word guns, because it absolutely will then put guns into the image. And it's the equivalent for whatever it is that you're trying to avoid. Process always with images is that you are going to generate multiple of them and pick the best of that. It will require some editing and iterating, and you will have to refine your prompts over time. So, um, yeah, the no text, yes. Yeah. So say, yeah, Carrie, I knew, Carrie, that you would know exactly the image that we were talking about where you said no guns, and it got increasingly hostile as you prompted more. And and even if you put not or so the thing is, when the tools are looking at image prompts, especially older tools, um, it doesn't look at the whole prompt cohesively. It breaks it up into phrases and tokens. And so it it sometimes will break the word no or not away from whatever comes after it. Unless that is, again, some tools do have a specific things. And where you can say a not and it'll be programmed to pay attention to that. But even then, I still find that it's better. And again, ChatGPT and Nana Banana are better and more logical. They're looking at it a different way, and they should be better at it. But if you're having trouble, that's one of the pitfalls to watch out for. So let's go through an example. This was one where I did reference image. So this was my original prompt. Editorial photo, Latina woman, mid-50s, glasses, green blouse, working on a computer in a modern office. And so I got 4 images. So I'm trying to get my reference image. So I like this one on the right, but what's wrong here? Got a little problem. I like her face, her glasses. Got a little problem I got to deal with though. You see it? Fingers. Even though the tools are better, like this still happens sometimes. And so I did actually really like this character. Um, but so in Midjourney, again, one of the reasons I still keep it is that you can do in painting on a portion of it, so you can keep the character overall and regenerate her hand. Um, it is worth it is worth taking a little bit of time to get your reference image right before you start doing other images. So in this particular case, I did the edit, basically erased that hand, and then I got 4 different variations to try to look at that. Now, I do have to be careful about this of like watching like the skin tone on this one on the right does not look right. And it doesn't always do as good of a job matching. So, you have to pay attention. And sometimes I've had to do 2 rounds of edits to things. But this one's pretty good. And if I wasn't happy with this, I would try either generating again, refining the prompt. I would do that. Yeah, and I was gonna say the scaling is wrong. I think I agree, Carrie, that like the scaling is wrong here. Honestly, this one isn't a great hand, and this one, the second one, actually still has too many fingers. So like, I picked this one, which was reasonable. Um, but again, right? Like sometimes it's going to fail. So this was the reference image in the setting that I wanted it. Generally solid color clothes are going to be easier than patterns, although the tools are getting better and I have been able to do patterns. And you can see that there's sort of a texture on on the sleeve of her blouse, that the tools actually did reasonably well with. So um, this was all demonstrated in Midjourney, but you could do this in Nano Banana or ChatGPT for your initial reference image, but take the time to iterate it and get that reference image right. And yeah, like Canva has that, like, do something, remove the pieces that you don't want, right? Use Canva if you're, I didn't see anybody saying that they're in Adobe, but if you're in Adobe, you can do some of that, like in painting a piece of it. And you may switch back and forth. So you can also prompt for a solid color background because isolated characters can work. And then you can combine that character and setting later. And depending on how you're doing it, sometimes the prompt for a white background, in a lot of the tools, you can actually even prompt for with the hex code of FFFFFF, right? And put it as a pure white background. So this was a set that I did all on a white background, easy enough to remove the background afterwards. If you've had problems with ChatGPT or Nano Banana not giving you transparent backgrounds when you ask for them, that's because they suck at it. It's not you. Um, Literally, it is going to be less aggravating to just prompt a solid background and then go remove the background in PowerPoint or Snagit or remove.bg or some other tool than to try to get Nano Banana to consistently make images with an actual transparent background. It is not worth your hassle. Someday they will get there. They are not there right now. So, multiple poses. I've got a couple of different kind of ways that we do this, but in general, right? I mentioned this earlier. We're going to change the expression or pose. We change usually 1 to 2 elements at a time. You're going to give it the reference image, prompt for what to change, and you often need a prompt for what to keep. You may need to tell it to keep the same facial structure, keep the same hair. So this one was in Midjourney, right? You can see the image on the left, and you can see highlighted here. I started out with the same bits. I basically repeated it. And then I changed. Here, I actually changed both her shirt and her pose. And sometimes that will work, but if you're having trouble, you may need to switch back and sort of like change the color of shirt first and then change the pose and setting. In Midjourney, this uses what's called the Omni reference, and there's basically a weighting on that of how similar do you want it versus how much are you changing. And if I'm changing clothes or changing setting, I'll go it a little lower to reduce the consistency. If I am keeping in the same setting, I increase the consistency. So that's how this tool works. So this is those additional poses for her. But I could also take that same reference image and put it into Nana Banana. Um, Nana Banana, I think, is the best of the free tools. It is a multimodal tool, which means you can prompt it with both text and images. You can edit and combine images. It is really good for consistent characters. It's really good for rotating the camera. I have found that this is where I go when I need to combine multiple characters into a scene because it does do much better than some of the other tools. And so yeah, you're gonna do what James is talking about in the chat, right? You're gonna you get the image wherever you do your reference image, which you can start in Nana Banana. You just need to watch the AI face and how generic it looks. Then you put that image in, and then you do that reference image, and you may need to put, and then you say, the reference image, and then you say change this. You may need, especially with ChatGPT, previously it'll drift over time, and then you have to add the reference image back. Um, yeah, you can do that. And James pointed out, you can actually like take an image, kind of draw in a section of like remove this, and it will fix that and remove your, like red virtual marker markup. So this is one where I uploaded two images and said, combine these two people into a single image where the woman professor's on the right, sitting behind her desk, and the student is sitting across the desk taking notes. And so I could put these two characters together. So with ChatGPT and Nana Banana, you are going to use tip prompts that are more like chat. You can use full sentences. You can prompt for not with the caveats noted earlier. Attach the reference image. If it is drifting away, attach the reference image again or start a new chat. Because sometimes it just like it gets to a context overload and then it loses track of where it's going. And then you just need to reset it basically. So for Nana Banana, this was one where I gave it that original reference image, and then I said rotate the camera around, show the back of her head over the shoulder view, and show her writing email. And I said, oh no, change the content of the screen to show a Gantt chart and with text. And so Nana Banana can do that. ChatGPT, I think, since the last update, could probably do this comparably well. The other tool, when we had our call on AI tools, I showed Flora a little bit. Flora is a node-based AI canvas. And so you can combine multiple tools into a single workflow. And I am increasingly liking this. One of the things that has been coming up in the chat is about, using the reference image and it drifting. It's a little hard to see in the screenshot, but there's lines connecting. This is my reference image, and then lines connecting it to all of the expressions. Everything always goes back to that original reference image. And so that helps keep it more consistent because you're always going back to the reference. Another set with that same character where here was the reference image, and then I did multiple different expressions of her. This is a couple of enhancements that I did. So let me bring up Flora a little bit because I know that not everybody saw it the last time. So this is so you can see in here that I have these groups where I have a reference image and then I have a bunch of different expressions with this. So I'm going to actually all right, I'm going to take this and I will, can I duplicate the whole group? Let's go down over here. Okay, there we go. And then if I want to replace this reference image, what I got for a good one? Let me grab. Yeah, let's grab her. So I can change this out. I could actually in this group run everything in here at once. It'll actually, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. It's going to take a while. So then I can get all 6 of these images with one click. So if I've got, it takes some time to set up those initial prompts of like, I have an annoyed expression and a disappointed and a happy and a thoughtful. So now I'm talking about changing her expression a bunch. And we'll see how this turns out here. One of the, while that's running, when I showed this 2 weeks ago, Jerson had asked about, or when was that called? Was it 2 weeks ago? Jerson had asked about illustrated characters. And so I did a set. So this is Nano Banana for the initial generation, where I've got it in different poses. And then did like a graphic novel style set of images. I actually used Flora has some new things of like it'll actually generate a workflow for you and make some sample prompts. This was another one. I was trying a different style there. I tried a pencil sketch format, which completely failed on the scenes on my initial attempt, and I realized the prompts needed a little bit more work. But you can see, I will say that this pencil sketch looks really obviously AI to me, right? Like this has that sort of generic AI face. But I will say that I could still probably use that in a scenario, right? Like if I was going for a sketch style, this could still give you that vibe. So now that this has had a minute to run, so we can do this with illustrated and photorealistic characters. So, I'm sorry, it really wants to have its little AI chatbot. So these are, I think it depends on the subtle expressions. Some of this is you can get really exaggerated expressions sometimes. So some of that is going to be in your prompt and some of that's going to be which model you're using. I'm using Flux as the model in here. So one of the things about this is that I can choose so I'm using Flux in here right now, but I could use Nano Banana or I could switch to these are all AI, these are all image models that are in here, and there's a bunch of different versions of things in here. So like switching models can help. But It's also um it's also a matter of how you describe those prompts. So, I am paying for Flora. It is like $18 a month on a monthly plan. Um, yeah, they just switched. I will say if you wanted to test this out, one of the things about Flora is that you can buy just credits. So you could spend $5 or $10 and get credits, which do not expire, use them for a project, and then not pay for it all the time as a subscription. Because, look, we're all freelancers here. Our work is very variable. You might need a ton of credits for 2 months for a project and then nothing for the next 6 months. And so committing into year-long subscriptions is part of the problem with this. So I know, yeah, I realize you need another. I know, I do understand. You don't necessarily need another subscription. And I get that. And it's one of the reasons Free Pick Spaces is a similar tool where you can do connecting and you can do some of these things. But you have to do a monthly or yearly subscription with that. And I think Flora's pricing is friendlier to freelancers. And so, unless you're doing 3D objects or something where I think FreePick has some more features that Flora does not currently. And you could do this and turn it into videos, and there's a lot more that can be done in Flora than what I'm going to show today. But for consistent characters, I am increasingly finding that this is helpful. Because so for here, for example, I gave it a little bit of a text prompt. It refined my prompt, made a conference room. Then I gave it two reference images and it put the two characters in the room together. So then we could assemble it with those multiple reference images. So that's my um, demo of Flora. All right, multiple characters into a scene. I will, Taylor, I've got the question about which tools in a little bit. So multiple characters in a scene. Even with the improvements in the tools, two characters is going to be the easiest right now. Um, in which case you use two reference images or two character reference images plus a background image. Nana Banana is, I think, the best at combining those right now. I would test the new ChatGPT as well. Flux is working some of the time too. Um, and Flora is also Flux where I can switch back and forth. Um, And yeah, Tom Coolman's been doing a bunch of this. I haven't gone to, I saw that he shared something of like sharing his process of things. So he's been doing a bunch of experiments and sharing his results. He's doing it with transparent characters and then manually assembling them onto scenes the way that we've all been doing it for forever. Um, and you definitely can do that. I don't know that that's the most efficient way though with AI because you should actually be able to give it a character image and give it a scene and let the AI do that work of scaling it and making it look like it goes together. But he does have background scenes and you can definitely use those. So I think that the way he's doing it um, is still in the mindset of we use cutout character images and that's how we do things. And I don't I don't think we should. Flora, I will say, can split like you were talking about Canva splitting things into multiple layers. Flora also has the ability to split an existing image into multiple layers so you can separate a character from the background too. So you do have that. And there may be reasons in animation or something why you do want to have the character and background separate, but so this is showing that combining the characters that I was talking about, having reference images, having a setting, and then putting them together. This was my prompt for that, where I said, and you can see this is kind of basically natural language, the way you would prompt an LLM, because this was prompting for Nana Banana. Combine these images, and then I'm describing what's happening. He's talking, gesturing with his hands. You will notice that it ignored my medium shot from the waist up. It 100% disregarded that in my prompt. So sometimes what I find is that I actually need to crop the background image first to where I want the scale to be. Like I'll generate a background image that's a far shot, but if I want a close image, I'm better off manually cropping it and then giving them that for my reference image and then pulling it back in. Or you just take this and then go crop it afterwards. I do find that I still have to crop things. Um, in Flora, I can get specific ratios and dimensions for my images, right? If you say that you want a 16:9 image, how many of you have tried to prompt ChatGPT or Nana Banana for a 16:9 image and gotten maybe something vaguely horizontal? Um, right? It tends to ignore those if you're doing it in the chat interface, and it obeys them every time in Flora, and I don't know why. But again, this is part of the, is this worth me paying for yet another tool? And I think it is because I'm saving time on having to like crop images to the right size later. Although I may switch to just paying for credits when I need them because they don't expire rather than doing a monthly thing. You can also do a character plus an object. So this was one, it did take me a couple of attempts to get to that very last one there, but it generated the object of the mixer. And then I had a similar prompt to put these two things together. And if you notice, Nana Banana was smart enough to put a reflection of the plate of cookies into the bowl on the mixer, even though that reflection does not exist on the original source image. Um, which was pretty wild to me. It won't always do that, and you have to watch out for it. But was something kind of cool in that particular thing. I will say that if you look too closely at the background of the kitchen image, you start wondering who designed that. But there's some flaws in the background. But I think the actual mixer turned out pretty well here. So mistakes happen though. Like sometimes you will get failures. Um, I have done, I know for sure, over 1,500 AI images. I'm probably actually closer to 1,800, maybe even 2,000, as I've been doing a lot of webinars and things for lately. Um, this is, remember how I showed how like I could not get Nana Banana to put these two characters together? They had the transporter accident here, and I could not, Nana Banana would not make these two people talk to each other. Like I, I don't know. So I gave up, and this is where I was like, forget this. I'm going back to Runway and doing it there. And Runway, I'm not paying for. I have a free plan on Runway, which is enough to get a couple of images here and there if I get stuck. So yeah. So don't feel bad if you sometimes get failures because it does happen. Um, Other tips. You can upscale your reference image. It is sometimes a good idea, and especially if you're in Flora where you make your reference image and then you can upscale it directly in that tool. I find that that's having a higher resolution reference image to start with for photorealistic characters in particular does help the subsequent generations. So Magnific and Topaz are the two tools for that. And again, if you're doing Flora, those are built in. One of the other big tools is we know that that sort of AI airbrushed waxy skin is a real problem with these AI generated images. And while I was happy with the pose that Flux generated within Flora for this, the skin was starting to look increasingly airbrushed. So this enhance core, I don't know how to say this tool. They are this is one that where you can tune how many wrinkles and dark spots you want to add to their face. But she does look more like a woman in her mid 50s on the right than she does on the left. Um, Yeah, sometimes you can prompt for more realistic skin. Sometimes you can ask for realistic skin texture, ask for visible pores, and sometimes that will work. I think it's a little bit of a mixed result right now. In ChatGPT or Nana Banana, you can prompt via sketch. And so if you're having trouble getting placement for something, now you can see that that image on the right still really looks like old ChatGPT. But I got the placement. You know, it always wants to put two people sitting at a corner looking past each other, and I was trying to get them actually looking at each other side by side, you can give it a sketch or like mock it up in PowerPoint with just like blocks and say, here's my placement. And a lot of the tools will actually be able to take that as the layout. So, tools, just on a couple of these tools that it didn't sound like people were using. Flux is one that has more realistic hands, does better text accuracy. Um, it does tend to use fewer credits when I'm in these tools like Flora or FreePick. So I will use this sometimes sort of like get as far as I can with this to save some credits and then switch to Nana Banana when I run into a wall. And it's also pretty fast. And Flux, you can't, yeah, Flux is one of the ones that you can upload photos of yourself. Where Midjourney, if you upload a photo of an actual real person, it is terrible. It will do consistent characters, but only with images that started in Midjourney. You can take Midjourney images and take them elsewhere, but you can't take images from elsewhere and put them in Midjourney. It doesn't, it only goes really one direction. So Flux, there's a Flux playground where you can try it out for free. And it does actually pay attention to your dimensions and your ratio for the size of the image. You can do text and references here. Free Pick Spaces is the other one that I mentioned for nodes. It does have tools for collaboration, so if you're looking at a team, Free Pick Spaces might be worthwhile. Similar to Flora, but I think their pricing's not quite as friendly to freelancers who need it irregularly. That said, you can pay for free pick for 1 month or 2 months. I paid for it for like 2 months to test it out and then dropped it. So, cost comparison. Um, I right now am paying for Midjourney and Flora. I do have access to Gemini both through Google Workspace and through Poe, which is the other tool that I'm paying for. I'd been only doing Midjourney for a long time, and then as I'm trying out Flora more, I'm like, I'm gonna have to add one more subscription. Um, Free Pick, you may, however, be able to get by with the essential plan. I just found that I burned through credits on that $9 plan so fast. Like I worked for like 3 hours and I was out of credits. Um, so um, you can kind of see where those are for you. If you're only going to buy one tool, this was the question from earlier, and I knew I had a slide to share it. Um, if you're only going to pay for one tool, I would suggest that you do one of these tools that gives you access to multiple models. Because Flora and FreePick are both adding, every time a model comes out with new improvements, they're adding it to their interface. So you pay one thing and you get access to a dozen different tools. So that I think is your biggest bang for your buck, is that you start with something like Flora Free Pick. If you're going to pay for two tools, then maybe you add some other specialized tool. And it depends on, Midjourney is the one that I'm liking, partly because I do a lot of blog headers and I like the illustration style variety there. But for other people, it may be that your second tool is actually something more like Brushless or Recraft because you're doing more icons and vector images, or Napkin because you're doing more infographics and slides or something. So those aren't as good for consistent characters, so I don't have those here. Ideogram was maybe on my list, but as Carrie said, I think you've probably got better options. And I think, and actually Ideogram is included in Flora, so you could get it without paying just for it. Some of these tools on their own have their own embedded features. Like Midjourney has the edit features built into it, which is one of the reasons that I've kept that one. So that workflow, start with that reference image, change one or two elements at a time, iterate and refine because it is going to go wrong. And then, switch your tools as needed. What did you learn today that you'll be able to use? in chat, or just pull yourself off mute because we're not that big of a group. Yeah, which tool to start with?
Mm-hmm.
Prompting tips. Yeah, Flora, I think there's I will say I don't see too many people doing these node-based tools within L&D. I see it. I follow a bunch of people who are in like marketing or media design to learn about this stuff, and they're all using tools like Flora and FreePick, or there's more complicated ones than this of Weavy and Comfy UI, and there's stuff that's harder than that I think is overkill for our field. So um, the all right, so prompt structure, yep, the node-based tools, workflow, diversity of tools. Um, the asset libraries. So I dropped my license for my subscription for the e-learning art characters. I had paid for that for a bunch of years. And it's not that I would never pay for that again if I had a specific project. I probably would, but I did drop it. And that was $300 a year for me. And so for me, paying for both Midjourney and Flora is still cheaper than what I was paying previously. For myself, for stock libraries, I am only doing things with credits right now so that I can use them as I need them. I have some credits on deposit photos that I got real cheap, a couple on a good deal, a couple years, like paid $100, of which I've used half of maybe in 2 or 3 years. And then I've got 123 RF is another one that I've used for images, and I'll buy like a small batch of credits when I need it for a specific project rather than an ongoing subscription. And I tend to, because just like I talked about with the AI images, I find that my use of stock images is extremely variable, because I'll go months without doing any at all, and then all of a sudden I'll have a development project where I need a bunch, and so I'll pay for it for 1 month. So now depends on what kind of work you're doing too. Yeah. So I think the timing is you'll notice that I did not promise here that this is going to be faster, because I am not sure it's going to be. It is pretty easy for me to spend a couple of hours generating this. I will, however, say that like when I go back and look at some of my older courses where I did the cutout photos from like the eLearning Brothers library, which is the other one that I used to use more. So like pulling that and assembling them into scenes and getting everything scaled right and getting things positioned and adding props into their hands. Or from eLearning Art, I used the vector-based characters, and then I was editing the vector-based characters to recolor them, to edit the poses to be specific. That was really time consuming too, and I'm not I'm not sure it's faster, but I also don't know that it's necessarily more time consuming. I also think that with Flora, as I get my workflow together, um, I think I think I'm gonna be able to speed my process up with Flora. I have another scenario that I need to generate a couple of things. One tip I've gotten is that if I have my export of all of the scenes for like so I prompt in Twine, or I generate my text in Twine for branching scenarios first. I can export that to plain text, which means I can upload it to Claude or another LLM and say generate a shot list for me of, so one for each passage of what images should I generate. And so then that helps me speed up, because then I can have a list and go through. And um so some of that I think is helpful. And I think that, yeah, I will say, James, like Nana Banana, if I'm prompting it in chat, is so freaking slow. Like I prompt and then it's like 3 minutes later I finally get an image. Flora I find is faster than prompting, even with Nana Banana, is often faster. So Um, yeah, I mean, I think you can, yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. So I think that there is some of this of figuring out where you need to spend your time. I still think it's worthwhile to do the time on your initial reference image before you do everything else because it affects so much of what happens afterwards. So yes, you need to spend time on that. And yes, sometimes it is going to fail. So,
Yeah.
um, are there other questions? I'll put
Yeah.
my contact info up here in case anybody isn't connected to me already.
And feel free to unmute if you have questions or put them in the
Yes.
chat, whichever. Yeah, very fascinating. Thanks so much, Christy. I think we all learned a lot about this, and I'll post this in the Slack community once it's downloaded and um, later today. Yeah, really great content. Oh, James, that's cool. Leading through the storm.
I like your concepts. And you know what? And so James, I think this is a great example of your images here of it would be impossible to find a set of stock images that did this theme and did it reliably. Like you'd never find a set of images that really worked for that.
Mm.
You would do generic, a person with an umbrella, you would do storm clouds, right? You'd never find anything that was that specific thing. The stuff where I was doing that I had the samples, it's like grad students in university biomedical research labs. You know what? There are no stock photos of that.
Mm-mm.
Like it I can't get good lab backgrounds. Um and admittedly, sometimes I can't get good lab backgrounds in the AI too. It definitely thinks that
At least there's a
microscopes
hope.
typically. Yes. Well, or I put the character and then I blur the background because that's sometimes how I do a blurred background or I do a like you can do a less detailed background
Yeah.
and focus on the characters because that's actually the important part. So yeah, stock photos of cops. I can totally see that. I had a class and I wrote stuff a few years ago that was for paramedics and getting paramedics in the correct American outfits and not because a lot of the ones on stock image libraries were like Eastern European or whatever or like just like I'm sure Carrie for like getting things that are correct for Canada and not American
Yeah.
is challenging. So this is what we can do now. All right.
Wow. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending the time going through this with us, Christy. We really appreciate it. So, chat love for Christy. Thank you so much. We appreciate you doing that. And we now we can go and play with all the stuff we just learned.
Yeah.
So we meet the first, second, and Thursday of the month. So next time we meet is going to be next Thursday on the 9th. That is the facilitator focused community hour where Danny and Bridget lead that one. So feel free to join then. And until then, we'll be on Slack if you need anything. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. See you later.
Well.
Bye.